Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where, as always, we will view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and I will be your guide along the way. Now, the world of showbiz is still dark, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. The first showbiz lights are coming back on, and the Midway has opened some of its attractions. The Ferris wheel is running. The rides are getting the desert dust brushed off them. Still, it is like a Venetian carnival, though. Everybody's wearing masks. And I still don't have a ticket. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's still far away. But if you pay close attention, you'll see it's growing. Every day, it's getting bigger. And it's getting closer. And before you know it, that light is super bright, and you're going to realize that it's a spotlight, and you're in it. There'll be thunderous applause from an audience hungry for the kind of nourishment only you and our kind can provide. The entertainers, the refiners of time and attention. So long we've been sleeping, but dawn is breaking. Time to gather a year's worth of dreams and step into the spotlight at the end of the pandemic tunnel. It's a pleasure to have you back with me here for this little trip. Last time I spoke to you, it was my birthday and pandemic birthday. And there I said I mentioned that I'd done a show, and I mentioned if someone was interested in me talking a little bit about my process, then I would. So that's what this episode is, just informally chatting to you about process. And those of you who are paying close attention in the last season, you'll remember that I think process is a very important way to look at what we do at all. The process of showmanship is not a thing. It is a process. It's something that we do that unfolds in time. It's not a painting or a sculpture. It's something that happens in between us and the audience. That's the sort of starting point. More like a fire than a rock. So the part of the process that I was going to talk about was more just the process of how I create the show. And of course, when I then sit down to make some notes and wonder what to say to you all about my own process, I realized that whenever I create a show for myself, which I did just before Christmas now, and that's a show that I will talk a little bit about, it's all happening quite unconsciously. I don't quite analyze everything. And once I sat down to try to analyze exactly what I do, because in a sense it just feels like I get these ideas of what I want to do, and then I do them. But of course I have done a lot of work as a director and co-creator on shows, and I'm currently working with 2 artists. That's been my saving grace during this pandemic time, to have calling people on FaceTime and have intense creative sessions. And it's during those times that I notice that I do actually have a process, and I have been working hard to articulate it, and that has resulted in the next project that we're going to do here on The Way of the Showman, and that is to actually lay out what the way is. Because as I see it, The Way of the Showman is not just a fancy name. It reminds me of things like the way of the samurai, the way of the warrior, which is it's a kind of a philosophical direction, and it's also a kind of a way to work out what to do and how to do it. Something which is based not just on whims, but on a little bit of a code. There's the Mandalorian way, for those who watch The Mandalorian and are into Star Wars. I've always been fascinated with these things, and I have, over the last year, put all of my thoughts together and created a kind of outline of what a philosophy of showmanship would look like. And as this season 2 starts in earnest, that is what our project will be. I will start releasing the podcast every second week, and every second week will be a new episode of The Way, where I will lay it out. And in the beginning, it won't be 100% directed just towards how to create a show or how to create an excellent act. There will be stuff like that thrown in, because that is, of course, what we do. But in the beginning, I will try to create a deeper foundation, a way to view the world, which is, of course, my way, and in many ways the way of the showman is my way. And ultimately, this is what is my process. My process springs from what I'm going to be divulging over the next, actually it'll take about a year, maybe a little bit more. Episodes coming out every second week. There might be somewhere between 25 and 30 episodes, I think. I've written a book that I first thought that I would be putting behind a paywall or selling, and now I've decided to read the book, and each chapter will be divided up, and I will use that as the contents of each of the episodes, because it's more important for me that people get to hear about it, people like yourself, than it is that we're trying to make a little bit of money on the side, even though as the pandemic keeps us all from doing what we love, we might all be running low on funds and low on mental energy to keep it together. So that is what's going to happen, and ultimately that will be where my entire process comes out, because I realized that trying to summarize it just doesn't really hang together. I've had too much to think, and I've thought too much to be able to synthesize it down and keep it just real easy. So the show that I did, the process for doing this show was basically, I got a phone call after having moved back from Las Vegas, moved back to Norway. And when I say moved back, it means I've moved back after 24 years of being away. I've done some shows there before, so this guy called Tom Erik, he called me up. He's from the main theater in town, and he told me about the possibility of doing a show. It was in 5 weeks. A big company had pulled out due to COVID reasons, and he said, if you can put together something for them, then we would love to put it on. And it was it's a big theater. Well, it's like 400 and something seats. Of course, with the pandemic on, you can't really have that many people in. At that time, I think it was 200 people. It's a difficult time to sell tickets, of course, when literally 2 days after I had put the tickets on sale, the Prime Minister of Norway came out and said, you shouldn't, people should really now just stay home. And somebody actually asked the question, said, well, but what about previously? He said we should still support culture and everything. And she goes, well, this is a time when we have to put health ahead of culture. So stay home. So this was the environment that I was trying to sell tickets in. So I was all right. But anyway, I think we sold about 3/4 or so of the 200 tickets that we could sell. So, but the important thing for me in this was not so much to sell tickets. It was the fact that it felt like an absolute gift. It felt like an opportunity to do what I loved. Like you just got, all of a sudden you got one chance of saying a few more things to somebody who you loved, who had moved away or passed on even. It's like a little resurrection. So this for me was all about the show. So from the start he it was kind of clear that I was taking the slot in a big theatre, big space, to feel like literally just a big stage, and I needed to make a kind of full evening show, so it needed to go beyond the kind of hour that I often do when I'm doing these kinds of shows. So in the end, the show became an hour and 20 minutes, so it's a long show as well. I thought of straight away that usually when I'm doing a show like this, I think about what's going on in my life, because the main character, the protagonist of all of my shows is myself in one guise or another. And I knew that I would be doing a few of the acts that I always do. I specifically didn't want to do the tennis racket act. I wanted to force myself to put new material in there, and that's kind of my go-to act. That's sort of in everything that I do. It's like my greatest hit or whatever. So I didn't do my tennis racket squeeze, which freed up 12 minutes of the show, plus the time that it takes for me to change into that costume, because there I wear just the tiny little shorts and whatever. So anyway, don't have to talk too much about that since I didn't actually do it, but I asked myself the question, like, what is it that's going on in my life? And one of the big things that is going on is doing this podcast. It's talking to all of you guys about all you beautiful people out there who I know is listening, and I'm getting all the good vibes from you. This has been my sort of biggest development as an artist. It's really been the biggest progress I've made as an artist, the biggest change of direction that I've done. So I needed to have that included. So the fact that this is storytelling, in a sense, I'm talking to you with some pre-prepared, and like now, completely off the cuff, just with some papers here, but I got them in a stack. I'm not even really looking at them at all. This is a very organic thing. So I wanted to capture some of that, some of the storytelling. I had also wanted to do new material after being in Las Vegas for 2 years and doing 10 shows a week. There is a certain routine that sets in that anyone who has done long seasons know. You just go through, you know all the details of what's going to happen, and there's very little challenge. So I wanted to really challenge myself. So I wanted to base it then on season 1 of this podcast, because the thing that really captured people's imagination here in Haugesund when I then announced that I was going to do the show, and when I got back, was that I was somebody who had a bit of a reputation as a performing artist and whatever, and I had to leave Las Vegas and come home because of the pandemic, because the pandemic was of course big news. And so I thought, okay, I'll tell that story, which is basically episode 1 of this podcast. It's called The Day Showbiz Died. So I wanted to tell that story, but I didn't want to open with that. I wanted to mix in something that comes in episode that from the podcast that was called The Showbiz Devil, of how I sort of sign on the dotted line, sign my life over to being a showman without fully having read the terms and conditions, just like we all do when Apple or any other app or whatever says, these are the terms and conditions, have you read all the 40 pages of text? And we all click yes, and we don't fully know what we've agreed to. So I wanted to include those, and that became 2 sort of 8-minute, 7-minute talks. And as I mentioned, the stage was very large, and together with the guys from the theatre, we landed on this idea. It was actually Tom Eric that suggested, maybe you could have a caravan on stage, and I thought that would be very good. And from there, that I kept thinking about the sort of stage design, and I wanted to set up a little area as if I lived there and I could do something there. And I got a wooden table, put it in front of the caravan, some camping chairs, and then mixing in a more kind of fantastic element, my father has a reel-to-reel tape recorder that he recorded stories for me as a kid, and when I was sick as a kid, and he recorded some stories on here with music and stuff on, and he had that one. I got the 50s mic also from my dad's collection, and I set that out so that it would look a bit like a sort of recording studio. When I moved into that scene, and we turned on festoon lightings on the caravan and the light on the actual recording machine, and then I would sit there and actually played the intro from the podcast, starting with greetings fellow travelers, speaking in English, and then I swapped to Norwegian after I'd done the introduction of the podcast, and I said this very special recording of the Way of the Showman will be in Norwegian, and then I just swapped to Norwegian, and I told an abbreviated version of that. That was kind of the center point of the show, so that was kind of like the theme there, and I hadn't done that to this extent before, just done storytelling. I probably spoke for just under 20 minutes or so, maybe 18 minutes, just the first bit where I was talking about the showbiz devil. I stood behind this tall kind of speakers box, which is actually my dad's magic box, what he uses when he does his shows. A tall kind of tapered square, not tapered sort of rectangular box, but tapered inwards down. So it looks like a kind of, I thought it looks a bit like a preacher kind of thing. So I mounted a sort of head torch light in the top of the table, and it lit right up into my face, and then I actually held like a notebook. I mean, obviously I knew what I was going to say, but I just liked that look, as if I was literally preaching to them. And the speech kind of started with that the devil has one hooved foot in the showbiz world is something everybody knows. Just trying to simultaneously translate that, because all my text was, of course, in Norwegian, which can be a challenge, since my whole sort of vocabulary of showman shtick is all in English. So that was the other kind of angle. It's flirting with this kind of semi-religious kind of thing. So that was one of the things that I wanted to, that was new, and that's a significant development for me. And I also wanted, of course, the audience to get some of this feeling that we share here on the podcast. The feeling that there is something more to what I do. And that it's not just the kind of frivolous something that you do without having thought it through. I want it to come across the way that it is for me, a lifestyle. And with that it also is a way of life, and not just a way of life in a frivolous way, but in what we will be looking at in the coming episodes now, as it is a specific philosophical approach to what showmanship can be. And I think that came out through those texts. Then I'd been wanting to redo I do a sword swallowing bit where I'm sort of dressed like a crazy magician, and I wear a fez, and the fez has a sort of strap under my chin, and then I magically produce a cucumber. So the act I look like I'm going to do magic, and then I make a cane disappear, it turns into a shower of confetti, and then I sort of vomit up a silk, and from this silk I pull out a cucumber. It doesn't quite make much sense, but it's very absurd and very weird. And then I take the cucumber and stick it into the top of my fez, where it stands up, and then I pull the sword out and chop it all up, so that the pieces are flying out into the theater. The pieces are flying out into the theater, so I'm like going, oh, don't worry guys, the cucumbers, I know there's COVID and everything going on, but the cucumbers, they've all been cleaned very nicely, so if you after the show, if you do touch one of these, don't worry, you can just hold on to it and you can safely eat it. And I got a bit of a laugh. Said it in Norwegian, so I expressed it hopefully a little bit more, with some more panache, but I'm trying to remember what I said. Anyway, after I'd done that sword swallowing, and then I'm about to swallow the sword, and the idea here goes back kind of to a show I did in 2006, where it was just mentioned through a single phrase or a reference, where I talked about, it was kind of based on what we'd been doing in the Happy Side show, but talking about sword swallowing as a form of carnival meditation. So I wanted to develop that a little bit more, and the show, with the sort of semi-religious tone of talking about the devil and selling your soul to the devil on the crossroads, stamping the dust, the road dust along the way of the showman, stamping it off my patent leather shoes and signing on the dotted line without actually reading the contents. And then I talk about how he sort of takes the revenge by shutting down Vegas in the second bit. I wrote a piece that was going to set up the next step of that, and to give this esoteric or occult flavor to it. So as I've been running around literally to this cranking Baltic music by Gypsy Hill, excellent band by the way. The song is called Balkan Beast, and it's a cranking tune. And just as it becomes, because they don't, as I said, I do the magic, and then I chop the cucumber with the sword, and it flies out to the audience, and then I give the cucumber to somebody in the audience to hold what's left of it, and I put a blindfold on, and there's lots of gags, and I chop the cucumber in the hand of the person in the front row. Anyway, at this point, they still don't know what's going on until I then slowly place the tip of the blade into my mouth, and at that point you can just hear the room. Now they collectively get, oh my lord, he's going to swallow this sword, which to a lay audience, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to anyone, really. So at this point the music then ends, like it's choreographed to end at that point, and the music goes, it becomes a classical piece, very calm, and I say, and as I run around before, I sound, mystery, what the hell is it? No one knows. What does it all mean? No one knows. Why am I doing this? No one knows. Not even me. So I've been shouting that sort of as I'm doing these crazy jumping and dancing. And then I'm standing totally still, and I go, and I'm just going to try and just translate it. It's not going to sound so supremely well written since I'm translating it here, but I just stand there now with the tip of the blade in my mouth. The music ends, and this slow classical piece by Arvo Pärt called Spiegel im Spiegel, it starts playing. It gets cello and piano, and I say, mystery. It's everywhere. The sacred, for instance, that's mysterious. And why my car keys always are in the last place that I look, that's unexplainable. And after having sought and studied mysteries for years, I have discovered that through some uncomfortable bodily exercises, a human being can be united with the mysterious. I got on the trail of this when I discovered that when faced with real mysteries, your mouth falls open and your face slowly lifts up towards the sky. And I would be doing that as I'm doing this, opening my mouth. And that's when you're ready to begin the ritual for mystical union. And as I'm leaning my head back, mouth open, as if I'm in awe of something, I just lift the sword up, and that position of looking in or up at something much grander and vaster than myself, as if the old god Cthulhu has risen out of the ocean and I am standing as a speck of cosmic dust on the beach and seeing this gigantic monster. As I stand in this position with my mouth agape, facing upwards, it's ready to be swallowed. And the sword. And through these bodily exercises, I got all the way to the limits of what I could take and what I could understand. And as I say that, I get to the limit or to the border of what I can do. I take confetti from my pockets and I drizzle it out around me in a sort of semicircle in front of me. And I continue and I said, for a mystery is first and foremost unexplainable. No, something you can't understand. And when you don't understand something, it can make us uncomfortable. Sword swallowing, for instance, that's something that we don't understand, so it makes us uncomfortable. Something we don't understand because mysteries and sword swallowing is two sides of the same phenomenon. Mysteries and sword swallowing are both terrifying and fascinating. They attract you and they repulse you at the same time. You don't want to see, but you can't stop looking. As I put something into me, my body wants to reject it. Sometimes right out all over the floor, and I'm of course showing that I'm about to swallow the sword, and that might make me vomit. I drizzle some more confetti out in a simulacrum of vomiting. So I love this mix of the silly and the sublimes. Obviously, part of my process in the beginning is to get these texts down, spending time in the morning before I drive my daughter to school. I get up and I start write and rewrite and pare down this text to get it. And then I say, well, sword swallowing, it's uncomfortable to perform, to do, and it is also uncomfortable to watch. So why do I do it? Why don't I just spare myself and you? Because the answer is that because mysteries, they're used as Norwegian word. It's grensesprengende, meaning it explodes or pushes the limits, or it explodes the limits is actually what it means. And as I do that, I take some confetti up next to my head and I go boof. It's consciousness expanding. Because the only way that one can understand mystery or the mysterious is to dare to take the mystery into oneself, to take it on, and make it become a part of oneself. And that is what I do when I swallow a sword. I swallow the mystery. And for one short, brief moment, the mystery becomes a part of me. I become mystery. And you, the audience, become witnesses, face to face, with something fundamentally inexplicable. Because you, like me, will face mysteries in life. We can't avoid meeting things we cannot understand. The only thing we can control is how we meet it. It comes from within ourselves. It is an attitude. You can choose how you face mystery, with fear and suspicion, or with open arms, open heart, and open mouth. And I would mime again there, leaning back with my mouth open in awe, assuming again the position that one takes when you swallow swords. And I'd finish off by saying, Because the fact that we don't understand everything, and the fact that there still exists mysteries in this age of technology and information, the fact that we don't understand everything is what makes life so exciting and so overwhelmingly beautiful. Just try and keep that in mind if you don't understand what you are about to see now. And the classical music swells, and I swallow the sword in a slow and ritual kind of manner. So, by kind of illustrating it with that act, starting out very silly and very clowny and loud and crazy movements and running around and up to the audience and cucumbers flying, and then talking about this deeper kind of, it's like, it's awesome. This is so awesome that when you watch it, it gives you so much awe that it sort of turns awful, or you become awful, filled with awe. That was kind of one of the puns or whatever that got me started down this text. When I'm working on the show, then I sit, as I said, I write it, and then I rehearse it and mime it out. I'm standing up and I memorize the text and I say it over and over again, making sure that I can. And in that process, then I pare down and put the intention behind everything and work out. I might find the music, put that on an earpiece so that I can be whispering it in the living room before my family has woken up in our flat there, in my dad's basement. And then I would work that out, work out the other text. So this is then the theme, and the main new act that I then created for the sort of new finale of the show became a 12-14 minute long bit where I did a plate spinning act. This is something I'd been thinking about for a while, the idea of doing a plate spinning act. I'd contacted my friend Davey Samford, who's an excellent plate spinner, one of the good guys. He has been doing this act since he went to circus school in New Zealand, and I met him when I first came to Brisbane in the end of the 90s in Australia. And I wanted to, so because I met a lot of people who do plate spinning, but he was the main guy that I knew of that did it, so I kind of asked him for permission and said, will it be okay if I do it? And he was very gracious and came with lots of good suggestions as to how to make a rig for doing it. So I did 12 plates of spinning, so I had to learn this new skill. I spent a bunch of time doing that too, and I wanted to do an act where most plate spinning acts kind of have, you set up the plates, then it gets more and more chaotic as you put up more and more plates. It gets more and more, you have to spin them and keep the speed going so they don't fall down. And people are doing other tricks along the way. So I had been jamming with my friend Paul de Beck, excellent magician, was working with the illusionists up until the pandemic hit. He lives in Las Vegas, and we were jamming back at the lovely house that we had before the pandemic, sitting by the pool in Vegas and jamming, having a beer, and talking about this act. It was Paul the thing that I said in the beginning of this podcast, with the light at the end of the tunnel coming closer and closer, and it turns out it's a spotlight and we're in it, or you're in it, I am in it. That was him who said he had said that to someone else, but as he said it was something that he thought maybe I had said, and I can't remember whether I have said it before, but even if not, then it was a very lovely thing to hear that the kind of thinking that I have been, the way that I'm speaking and the way that I'm thinking on this podcast that it has kind of become possible to connect to. Because after listening for a while to this podcast, I mean, I do talk about this lens of showmanship. And even though the first season was just lots of disparate and different things, it all comes from this same way of thinking about what we do that is, to me, richly meaningful, and which will be what I will be talking about over the next 30 episodes. So you'll hear all about it, but it's lovely to see that there's been a slight shift in consciousness, just to go, oh, this is something that this person might have said. Are you already aware that if you speak like this, then it's like you're speaking as one of those who know the way. I am a follower of the way. Yeah, I mean, I like that. I'd like to hear that. It's and Paul hasn't been the only one. It's the language and the way of speaking and the way of thinking is what, in a sense, naturally follows from when you get a feeling of what this lens is. There'll be a sort of shift in people's viewpoints. People have been talking about from being able to see what I say to being able to see things in the way that I'm talking about them. Seeing the world through the lens of showmanship. Very, very good stuff. What was I saying before here? I lost my thread here. And it's about the plate spinning act. So I'd been wanting to do, instead of doing tricks in between, I mean, a few people go, you got the glasses and you got the spoons lying on a tray, and then you flip them up and you go, oh, we want to do a quick handstand or whatever in between the plates. But I wanted to do this bit where I tried to read a poem, and I did. So I had a little table at the front with a glass of water and a book of poetry. So after this music comes on there too, it's like the close of the act, and it was kind of like a visual representation then of that was the theme or the idea of the act that I wanted it to express in the show, like it is the visual collapse of my world. And I'll explain how that idea then came in, because this is in many ways my general approach, is that my process is that I question myself as to what do I want to put in this new show, what's going on in my life that I need to put in. And it was the podcast and the storytelling element of it. So all the texts that I wrote that were new, they were connected together, and the culmination of it would be this visual poetry reading act with plate spinning that I'll talk about. But then the second thing is then to go, what do I want the audience to experience? What do I want them to feel, and what do I want them to think? And that was, I wanted them to have this feeling of meeting somebody who had a secret knowledge, who was a subscriber to or a follower of the way of the showman. And I think when I talk and when I'm performing, not so much when I'm just doing a 5-minute spot in a show or whatever, but when I'm doing a full show, then you do get that. And I think through these stories that I've sort of sketched out for you, or that I told, and then the way that the sword swallowing was presented with a kind of 4 or 5 minutes when I just spoke it without interjecting random stuff like I did when I told you now. It took about 4 or 5 minutes to say that thing about mysteries and sword swallowing. So that sort of gives you this tone, and that was what I wanted for the audience. So that's part of my process. What do I want from the show? What do I want to do in the show? And then what do I want the audience to feel? What do I want them to think? And like, that's kind of, as I'm then questioning, like that those will shape how I present them. So I wanted them to sit there with this feeling like this was something more than just frivolous entertainment. So to get the show started from the very beginning, then I came in, I was dressed in, I do this bit where I just squeeze myself into one of those pop-up circus tents that you could used to be able to get from IKEA. I've cut 2 little holes in there so I can stick my legs through it, so that the tent is literally just walking in with legs. I was inside that tent and shouting in a megaphone, doing one of those spiels like, roll up, ladies and gentlemen, step right up and get your tickets, and having a circus orchestra version of the that track going. So it's all real, like circus has come to town. I came in the back of the auditorium and then walked down the stairs with this tent on, sort of falling around. And because I was inside the tent with the door shut, just with the legs out, I was kind of safe to go next to the audience, COVID safety and all. Go down. Then I came out on stage, and for the first 20 minutes I was just doing unadulterated, funny business, silly magic act, my spoon act, where I put the spoon up my nose and balance it on my nose. And that was kind of the closer of those 20 minutes, which after having done it, I don't know how many hundreds of times I've done that act, it's got a real sort of hysterical, funny thing to it. So that became the opening of the show, and that lured you into okay, this is just good times. I do crazy juggling and balancing a knife on a spoon on a thing in my mouth. So it's all circus stuff, and it's all funny and all good times. And then came the speech about the devil, kind of out of nowhere. So that's how I wanted to lead him in. This was how I sort of led the audience into the show. That was the sort of scale of it. Took them through the stories, did some other acts, talked more about mystery, did a magic trick, and a few other acts in there that I won't go into. But then at the end of the show, classical music comes on, and piano, as this fast-paced, beautiful track. And anyway, I set up the first 4 plates, and then I go to the front, pick up the book, and start talking about this Norwegian poet that I love. And he has a very excellent poem called My Heart, and it uses the imagery of fairy tales. And he talks it's a poem where he talks to his heart as if it is the little poor boy in a fairy tale that needs the help, and that the little boy in the fairy tale, aka his heart, it seeks to get home to his father's castle that lies beyond the wild blue yonder, where it is the most beautiful castle there is. So anyway, I'm about to read this, but I don't start the poem just yet. I just start talking about the poet. He's a very interesting cultural figure from 60s, 70s, so one of the, left-wing radicals of the time that would speak out for the underdogs, whether it was the people who misfits of schools. He was a Waldorf school man as well, and he was all this stuff. So I'm talking about this, and then keep being interrupted to run back and grab another plate to put up or to keep them from falling down. So that's the gag that I have. And I was jamming with Paul, and he came up with excellent things, like I take the book up and to read, finally open it up to read a poem, and then of course I have to run back and slam the book shut. But it's a big book of about 400-500 pages, so it's every time I go back and have to do it, I have to look for the spot again. So the next time when it happens, just as I'm closing it, I pull a piece of paper out of my pocket and stick it into it. So now I've got a bookmark in it, put up another couple of plates, and as I then go back to grab the plate and grab the book, I start talking a bit more about the poet, and just when I can see that the plates are about to go, I open up the book and read, and there's like a shopping list, and I read the bookmark, the shopping list, and so it's like, real clowny kind of stuff. And for never having tried it, because that's one thing that happens when you're making a show in the pandemic. There's no one. I couldn't do a test audience. There was just no. So I was doing it all in isolation, just rehearsing alone and writing the text and testing it out. But I was going, this is going to be fine. And my dad helped me make it so that the book, when I didn't open it up in the last time, and the music is now peaking out, and there's like a whole bunch of the plates are going, like 10 or so of them are going, and it's all wobbling all over the shop. And then as I go, I'm opening the book yet again to supposedly start the poem, and it's one of those fire books. So I'd open it up, and my dad had built it with wicks inside and a little igniter, so that when I opened the book it was all burning. And then I closed the book again, run in, and the music changed into this Igor track called anyway, it's the same track. It's like a technotronic death metal version of the same classical track, done with this hard electronic sounds. Very excellent, but it created this great sort of chaos for the last, can't remember now if it's the last 4 plates or so, to set them up. So I knew then that there was now 2 minutes left, the music cranking, and it's very loud, and it's now all of a sudden changed from this, and I'm running around, changed from the classical into this other chaotic music. And then right towards the end, when I get all 12 plates are going, the music ends abruptly, and I'm standing in the center of this. It's like 4 plates are on one stand to my left, 4 plates between me and the audience at the front on one stand, and 4 plates on some inside this U, horseshoe shaped, blocked off from where the audience is, in the auditorium. And I'm standing inside the thing, and as the music ends, it goes totally quiet, and all the 12 plates are going, and I open the book, and the book is burning again for the second time, and then I start to read the poem. My heart, it is an orphaned child. That's sort of roughly how it starts. I'm not going to try and do the poem here now, because it's in Norwegian, and I can translate my own text, but it's hard to get the emotional punch of it. But as I'm doing this, I just love this image then of the showman whose world has been, whose world has collapsed. I've just told them that story of how I ended up in Vegas to having signed a deal with the devil, and then the devil shuts down everything with a pandemic. I'm sort of being a bit solipsistic, and as if the whole thing was just done just to keep me on the road. And then we talk through the mysteries and everything, and then at the end I've struggled, and I just have the whole world is turning on me, and I'm spinning these plates trying to get it all happening. It goes all quiet. Classical music starts again, a piece by Bach. Lovely, it's organ sonata number 4, played on the piano by this guy called Vikingur Olafsson, which is an extraordinary piece of music. If you like Bach, this is the shit. And anyway, this is going, and I'm reading this poem where my heart is suddenly starring as the poor boy in the fairy tale, and that seeking is. So then you have this image of a man with a burning book reading a poem that he's finally getting to write after having stressed back and forth, and all the 12 plates are going. I'm standing in the middle, and then I start to read a poem, and now the poem goes for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. So slowly, as I am reading the poem, the plate starts to fall down, and they smash, and bits are going everywhere. So as my world is collapsing, I'm standing in the center of it with a burning book of poetry, and as the world is all crumbling and smashing all around me, I just refuse to partake in it and stand against it as the showman against the apocalypse, reading the poem. And so that was basically the show that I did. And after that I did my can stack, where I sit on a thing and go follow your dreams. Even if it's all falling apart, you can do what you want. And so that was the show, and that was my approach, how I tried to combine what I want to say with what I want the audience to feel. And it's the overarching story of what was going on in the show and everything, what I wanted to say, some of the moods that I had tried to make, and of course start out at home inside rehearsing it all out, and then I go out in the garage or into a studio and try to map it all out on the floor. Very practical to know all the texts and stuff before I go out and start to be on the floor trying to work out which prop goes where and how we all take it out. So that's all the stuff that sort of talk through the show. I guess this is a little bit similar in a way, although with that podcast called Talking Shtick, that's an excellent podcast for people to listen to, where magicians talk through their show. So I hope that this isn't just a solipsistic exercise. It's giving you some insights to what it is like for me when I'm making a show. Of course, I'm swapping back and forth with actually talking about the material that I created and not just telling you the details and nitty-gritty process, the steps that I took, but I've given you a sort of overview over it, of what that process was like. So anyway, if you are interested in doing any work with me, then that is, of course, an opportunity. You can contact me if you wanna have me share that process with you. I am currently working with 2 people, so I'm not. That's quite big projects, both of those. But anyway, I don't know why this turned into some sort of selling myself, but it's the kind of stuff that I think about when I'm not talking to you. And I go, I should tell people that I'm available to do this kind of stuff, and then the time comes for me to actually talk to you like now, and it feels a little bit weird. But anyway, I will come back in 2 weeks from now, and that will be the first episode of The Way, where I will lay out the way of the shaman and give you the best possible chance of getting your own lens, or getting to understand the foundations of what shapes my thinking in these matters. Just before I let you go, I'll say that my wife has signed me up to one of these donation pages called Buy Me a Coffee. If you have valued our time together, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Captain Frodo. And then you can very easily, with a couple of clicks and some things, you can drop me a micro donation or a macro donation if you are so inclined. And I think that is all that I need to say. And then that means that all that's left to be said is take care of yourself and those you love. And I really do hope to see you along the way.